Not because my numbers were down. Not because a single client had ever complained. That's what made it so hard to process when my badge stopped working on a Tuesday morning in March. I stood at the front entrance of a building I had walked into nearly every day for 19 years, and the door just didn't open. I waved my badge again. Nothing. A 23-year-old receptionist I had personally hired 2 summers ago gave me a look I'll never forget, half pity, half discomfort, and buzzed me in without saying a word. That was how I found out. Not from my boss, not from HR, from a door that wouldn't open. Let me back up, because you need to understand what I was walking away from, or rather, what was being taken from me. I joined Hartwell Distribution Solutions in the spring of 2005, fresh off a failed startup and desperate for stability. The founder, a man I'll call the patriarch, was the kind of leader who made you feel like the work actually meant something. He had built the company from a single warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, into a regional distribution powerhouse, with 11 facilities across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic. When I came in as a regional account manager, we had 41 employees. By the time all of this happened, we had over 300. I had grown with that company the way you grow with a family. I missed my cousin's wedding for a contract renewal in Pittsburgh. I worked through Thanksgiving 2011 when our Cleveland facility had a systems failure and 47 clients were at risk of missed deliveries. I know the first names of children belonging to clients I've had for over a decade, not because someone told me to, because that's who I am, and the patriarch saw that in me early, and he rewarded it. By 2019, I was Vice President of Client Relations. 31 accounts, collectively representing just under $60 million in annual contract value. I had built those relationships myself, some of them from cold calls I made in my second year. Some of those clients had turned down better pricing from competitors 3 separate times because they trusted me specifically, not the company logo. Me. Then the patriarch had his first heart attack. It was minor, his doctor said. A warning. He was 67 and had the lifestyle of someone who believed stress was a personality trait. He slowed down, but he didn't stop. What he did do was begin grooming his son-in-law to eventually take over. His daughter, who I had known since she was in college, had married a man I'll call the son-in-law about 4 years earlier. He had an MBA from a good school, a confident handshake, and an absolute vacuum where operational knowledge should have been. He had never worked in logistics a day in his life. His background was in commercial real estate, which is a fine industry, but it is not this industry. The patriarch brought him in as Chief Strategy Officer in early 2022. I told myself it would be fine. I had survived leadership transitions before. I kept my head down, kept my numbers up, and tried to give the son-in-law the benefit of the doubt the same way I would have wanted someone to give me. That became harder every quarter. He had ideas. Lord, did he have ideas? He wanted to rebrand the company. He wanted to implement an AI-driven client outreach system that would, in his words, replace the need for relationship-based selling. He said that phrase in a company all-hands meeting. Replace the need for relationship-based selling. I watched 3 of my best account managers exchange glances across the room. The patriarch wasn't at that meeting. He'd had a second cardiac episode 2 weeks prior and was working from home more often. I requested a one-on-one with the son-in-law in November of 2022. I laid out, as calmly and professionally as I could, why the AI outreach model would be damaging to our highest value accounts specifically. These were not transactional clients. They didn't respond to automated emails. Several of them had explicitly told me over the years that the reason they stayed with Hartwell was because of the personal touch, because when something went wrong at 11 p.m., I answered my phone. You cannot automate that. You cannot build 19 years of trust with a software subscription. He listened to me the way people listen when they've already decided, nodding at the right moments, saying that's a fair point in a tone that meant he found nothing about it fair at all. We appreciate your institutional knowledge. We really do, he told me. But the company needs to scale beyond any single individual's relationships. That's just good business architecture. Good business architecture. I drove home that night and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. What happened over the next several months was a slow erosion I couldn't stop. The son-in-law hired a new chief revenue officer, a man he knew from his real estate days, no logistics background, sharp suit, aggressive manner. Together, they began restructuring the sales and client relations division. My team was reorganized under the new CRO. I was technically still VP of client relations, but I was being systematically removed from strategic decisions, not invited to key meetings, and given the distinct impression that they were waiting for me to either fall in line or leave quietly. I did neither. I kept showing up. I kept servicing my accounts. I kept delivering. Here's what they didn't account for. I had been meticulous about documentation my entire career. Every client interaction, every contract renewal note, every communication logged in our CRM with detailed context. I knew our client base better than anyone alive, and the clients knew it. In February of 2024, the patriarch officially stepped back from day-to-day operations. He announced it on a Friday afternoon video call. His voice was thinner than I remembered. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He said he was proud of what Hartwell had become and that he had complete confidence in the leadership team going forward. He didn't look at his son-in-law when he said it. 3 weeks later, I was called into the son-in-law's office on a Wednesday afternoon with no prior notice. HR was in the room. A folder sat on the desk between us. He didn't drag it out. I'll give him that. We're restructuring the VP level of client relations, he said. Your position is being eliminated. I asked him to clarify what that meant. Your role no longer exists in the new organizational structure. We're transitioning client management to the centralized team under the CRO. 19 years. $60 million in annual accounts. A building I had helped grow from 1 warehouse to 11. I asked if this was performance related. It's a structural decision, he said. I asked if there was a severance package. He slid the folder across the desk. The gesture was calm, unhurried, like he'd practiced it. Inside was a separation agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, and a non-solicitation clause covering every Hartwell client for a period of 24 months. The severance offer was 4 weeks of pay. 4 weeks. For 19 years. I picked up the folder. I looked at the non-solicitation clause specifically. It was broad. It covered not just direct solicitation, but any business relationship that results from prior Hartwell client connections. Under their interpretation, if a former client found me on LinkedIn and reached out, I could be in violation. I set the folder back down on the desk. I need time to review this with my attorney, I said. The son-in-law glanced at HR. Something moved across his face, irritation, maybe a flicker of something less comfortable. We'd like a response by end of week, he said. I stood up. I thanked him for his time. I walked out with nothing but my phone and the memory of what that building used to feel like when the patriarch still ran it. I called my attorney that evening. We went through the agreement line by line. His assessment was direct. The non-solicitation clause was aggressively worded, but potentially enforceable in Ohio, depending on how broadly a court wanted to read business relationship resulting from prior connections. The severance, he told me plainly, was insulting given my tenure, and I had every right to negotiate. I also had another call that week. Actually, I had several. Word travels fast in a mid-size industry. Within 4 days of my departure becoming known, and I had not told a single person, which means someone inside Hartwell had I received calls from 6 clients. Not me reaching out to them reaching out to me. The first was a man I'll call my longest client. We had renewed his contract 7 consecutive times. He had sent me a bottle of bourbon when my father passed in 2018. He asked me, without any preamble, what I was going to do next. I told him I was still figuring it out. He told me that whatever I figured out, he wanted to be part of it. I didn't solicit him. I didn't mention the word contract. I thanked him and told him I'd be in touch once I knew more. Then I sat with that phone call for a long time. I did not sign the separation agreement. I did not sign the non-disclosure agreement. I did not sign the non-solicitation clause. I called HR back on Friday morning, the last hour of their requested deadline, and told them I would not be signing the documents as presented, and that if they wished to negotiate revised terms, my attorney was available. There was a very long pause on the other end of the line. Then, a clipped "will be in touch," and the call ended. They were not in touch. No litigation. No follow-up. The agreements were apparently only intimidating if the other party believed the threat. Over the next 6 weeks, I did what I should have done years earlier. I registered an LLC. I set up a small office in a shared workspace near downtown Columbus. I hired one person, a former colleague, who had left Hartwell voluntarily 8 months prior and had been doing independent consulting. I built out a basic infrastructure, CRM, invoicing, a phone line. I did not reach out to a single Hartwell client during this time. I did not have to. By the end of the second month, 14 former clients had contacted me through various means: LinkedIn, mutual industry contacts, direct phone calls to a number several of them already had in their personal phones. They were not calling to chat. They were calling because the service they were receiving from Hartwell had deteriorated noticeably and rapidly, and they wanted to know if I was available. I was available. I want to be transparent about something. because I think it matters. I did not orchestrate this. I did not whisper in anyone's ear. I did not send a single email that could be read as solicitation. What happened was the natural consequence of what the son-in-law and his CRO apparently did not understand, that in a relationship-based industry, the relationships belong to the person, not the logo on the building. The centralized team they had built was efficient on paper. Standardized communication templates, automated check-ins, quarterly review calls scheduled by software. For commodity clients who cared only about price and delivery metrics, it probably worked fine. For the accounts I had spent years treating as partnerships, clients who called me when they were thinking about expanding into a new market, clients who had referred me to their industry peers, clients who considered me a business advisor and not just a vendor contact, it was a disaster delivered in a pleasant formatting. My longest client told me later that his first automated relationship check-in email arrived addressed to the wrong contact name. Their AI system had pulled outdated data. He had tried to reach the new account manager 3 times over 2 weeks before his assistant finally got a response. He said he'd felt like a ticket number. I want to tell you something I haven't told many people. In the first weeks after I was let go, I went through a stretch that had nothing to do with business. I have 2 kids. My older one is finishing up at Ohio State this spring, and my younger one just started high school. My wife has her own work, but our household had been built significantly around my income, and the stability I assumed would always be there. 19 years of assuming that. I sat at the kitchen table one night, laptop open, looking at the LLC registration page, and I thought about closing it and just finding another corporate job, something safe, something with a regular paycheck and a badge that would actually open the front door. My wife sat down across from me with 2 cups of coffee and didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, "You've been the most valuable person in that building for at least 10 years. You know it. Your clients know it. The only people who didn't know it are the ones who just handed you your freedom." I finished the LLC registration that night. By month 4, I had signed contracts with 19 clients. 16 were former Hartwell accounts. 3 were new referrals from existing clients who had told colleagues about the change they'd made. My revenue in that 4th month exceeded what I had been making in monthly salary at Hartwell by a meaningful margin. I was working harder. I was sleeping better. Then, things at Hartwell began to accelerate in a direction I had not predicted, even though in retrospect it was completely predictable. The son-in-law and his CRO had, in addition to dismantling the client relations structure, begun implementing cost-cutting measures across the operations side. They reduced staffing at 2 facilities. They renegotiated carrier contracts in ways that saved money in the short term but created reliability issues. They had launched the AI outreach platform across all accounts, the same platform I had warned about 14 months earlier, and it was generating complaints from clients who had previously been Hartwell loyalists. 3 of Hartwell's most senior operations managers resigned within a 6-week period. 2 of them I knew well. One of them called me after submitting his resignation and told me he had watched the company change in a year more than it had changed in the previous decade, and not in any direction he recognized. I heard from industry contacts that 2 enterprise-level accounts, significant ones, the kind that anchor a company's financials, had declined contract renewals. One of them I knew. He had been a Hartwell client before I even joined the company. He did not contact me. I want to be clear about that. He went to a competitor. But the loss of those 2 accounts, combined with the operational issues and the staff departures, apparently created a liquidity situation the son-in-law had not modeled for. In October of that year, 8 months after they had slid that folder across the desk to me, Hartwell Distribution Solutions announced a strategic restructuring. They were consolidating from 11 facilities to 6. Roughly 90 employees received termination notices on the same day. The son-in-law released a statement about right-sizing for market conditions and positioning the company for its next phase of growth. The patriarch was not quoted in the statement. I heard later, from someone who still had a relationship with the family, that the patriarch had been told about the restructuring on the same day it was announced publicly, not before. The same day, I thought about that for a long time. I don't feel triumphant about it, and I want to be honest about that too. Those 90 people who lost their jobs, many of them were colleagues I had worked alongside for years, people who had nothing to do with any decision that was made. The receptionist who buzzed me in that Tuesday morning when my badge wouldn't work, the guys in the Cleveland warehouse who had pulled overnight shifts with me in 2011. They deserved none of what happened to them. What I felt was something more complicated than triumph. It was a kind of grieving, actually, for what the company had been, For what the patriarch had built over 40 years and watched come apart in less than 2, my consulting firm is now in its second year. We have 6 full-time employees. I brought on a partner last spring, a woman I had worked alongside at Hartwell for 11 years, who left on her own terms after the restructuring announcement. We have 27 active client accounts. 4 of them are entirely new relationships we built from scratch, which I'm quietly most proud of, because it proves this isn't just about taking something I had before, it's about building something real. I was at a regional logistics conference in Indianapolis this past fall. One of those events where the name tags are laminated and the coffee is always slightly wrong. I was walking between sessions when I saw the son-in-law's CRO, the man he had brought in from real estate to replace the architecture I had built. He was there alone. His company badge said independent consultant. We made eye contact. He nodded. I nodded back. That was all. I think about something my oldest said to me during that stretch when I was sitting at the kitchen table wondering whether to give up. I had been venting, not the full story, just the outline, the kind of thing you filter when you're talking to a kid. And he looked at me with the particular clarity that young people sometimes have and said, "Dad, sounds like they needed you more than they knew." He was right. But here's what I've learned that I didn't know then. The goal isn't to be needed by people who don't see your value. The goal is to find the people who do and then build something together that neither of you could have built alone. I built that for 19 years for someone else's company. For the last 2 years, I've been building it for my own. And my badge? It opens every door I walk up to. Because I'm the one who decides which doors those are now. If you've made it to the end of this and any part of it sounds familiar, the invisible contribution, the badge that stops working, the folder slid across the desk, I want you to know something. The moment that felt like the end, the door that didn't open, that was actually the first morning of a different story. It just took me a little while to see it that way. If this hit something in you, you know what to do. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you want to see more stories like this, hit subscribe. There are more stories where this one came from, and every one of them has the same thread running through it. The people who bet against you are rarely as right as they think they are.